all that the past is your recollection of memories and a quote unquote past event. And if you change how you perceive it, you've changed the past. And then you've freed yourself in this now moment to be whatever the fuck you really want to be.
Yes. So much of suffering that people experience is them chaining themselves to a past experience and subconsciously believing and feeling into a reality where it's still happening in the now.
All right, everyone, welcome in to today's episode. This is the last episode of 2024, but you know what? That doesn't matter because this is an episode about time and about the truth of time and whether it actually exists or not and what the heck to do about it. And we're purposefully releasing this episode, if you're listening to it in real time or not. It will transcend time, of course, but we know a thing or two about timing, and so we released this episode right around the new year, the quote unquote new year, because there's something about the turning of the calendar that gets us thinking about time and the passage of events and our lives and this mysterious thing that is life passing, right? And the beginning and end and chapters closing and opening. So we wanted to take the time to dive in to this concept, because as you could relate to, time is really something that we all take for granted, in the sense of early on it's established what this concept of time even is, right? When I say time, you know in your mind what it is, but it's probably hard to actually tell me with a good definition what that is. And a lot of these relationships we have to quote unquote time are pretty set in stone. We don't really think about it, but we let the construct of time to kind of run and determine our lives a lot of the time. I'm realizing how much the word time is in our life. Crazy. It shows you why we're doing this. And we have a feeling that something very magical is going to come through today. We have a mix of some great research and references and sciencey things for you, but there's also beautiful spiritual elements. And you're going to get 3 very important questions answered for you today. And I kind of hope that this conversation causes more questions, because I think it's one that is going to just open up a whole wormhole of possibility and different ways for us to relate to our lives. So one of the first things that I want to say, and then I'll tell you the 3 questions that we're going to answer, is essentially to, set the stage here, right? Which is that time is relative. Pretty much everybody agrees to that, right? It's relative, it's subjective, right? And it's not just like in crazy physics experiments that we find this out, or movies like Interstellar, right? Where they're space traveling and they're aging differently depending on the people on Earth, right? This is proven in our world, right? So we know that clock time, this thing that's constructed, was man-made. It's made up to track events. So everybody kind of agrees on that, yet we don't really think about it enough and what that means for our lives. So this is important because how we approach time and events determines a lot about our lives, our productivity, right? Our presence, who we are as people, our sense of self. So much of our reality has this element of passing events, and I grew up doing this thing and this thing happened before, and this is why I am this person now, and today I'm working on this thing so I can have this thing happen in the future. It's very linear. And today I think we'll get to a place where we see the utility of linear time and we know how to really use that to actually make us more limitless, but we also move away from the limiting version of time and space and the passing of events that is actually causing suffering. So the 3 questions that we're going to answer and dive into today. Number 1 is time a construct, and what is the true reality of time? This is where we'll get into some of the science, some of our own theories, and just kind of open up this can of worms. The second question, 2-part question, being, can you change the past? And is the present a result of just the past, right? Really kind of what is past, present, future? And then lastly, what can you do to free yourself from the limitations of time, yet also expand yourself by using its utility, right? By tapping into the utility of clock time and moving calendars and all the fun stuff. Those are three questions we're going to dive into today. And I just want to give Nikki a second to riff on any other things coming up that she's excited about before we dive into question number one.
I just feel like this conversation is so timely for me because in my life, literally just this past week, I've been feeling like there's this energy of like, I'm rushing. I need to get here. I need to get here. And it's been adding this pressure and this energy to my state of being that doesn't really feel like it's in alignment with my true essence. And you and I have been chatting a bit about this, but I do feel like there's an opportunity for me to evolve the way that I relate to time. So I feel like this episode is also going to be super powerful for anyone that feels like there's not enough time in the day, or they're running out of time and there's not enough of it to achieve their dreams, because the way you relate to time is going to dictate your experience of reality. And the way that you relate and respond to the now moment is also going to dictate how you relate to this thing called time and reality. So this is a very timely episode. And I love that we're doing it at the end of the year too, because you know what? I'm not even going to say it. I'm going to save it until the end when we get into that part of the conversation with like healing and changing your state of being. Powerful stuff we're going to dive into. I'm excited. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up actually, because I feel like I have a lot coming through me and a lot that I want to say actually in regards to like this concept of not enough time and like productivity kind of category. I feel like a conversation of time can't be had properly without addressing this like construct and idea of productivity and like how we relate to time. And I've been having some revelations about this myself too. So I have a feeling this episode is going to bring us, the two of us, some very interesting revelations and also help anyone to, just essentially feel more present and free and limitless, which is essentially true nature. Okay. So question number one, is time a construct, and what is the true reality of time? Do you want to take any of these definitions, or do you feel like you enjoyed explaining any of these, or should I send it?
Yeah, I mean, I have something coming through with this that relates to the way that Bashar channels his guidance on what time is and explanations. And the way that he describes it is like one of those flip books where you're pushing the pages with your fingers, and what you are perceiving as the pages flip is a story, an unfolding of events. And what Bashar states as time is just us shifting from one frame to the next. And the construct of time is what allows us in the 3D realm to experience sequence of events that leads to stories. So we're able to look back at the quote unquote past, which is just a frame that we were in, and connect it to our future and create this thing called a story. And I find this so interesting because when you can logically think about this from the perspective of it being a book, you understand that every frame is already existing in the now moment. And you can expand this out into more of like a quantum definition, that every single possibility exists as a frame in the now moment and is happening in the now moment.
Right.
So what we perceive as time is just us shifting from frame to frame.
Yes. That's making me think of, I think this is an Alan Watts like snippet that's in a song. I think it's a Blondish song, I want to say. But anyway, he has this really great way of explaining how like it's even like this concept of the past is recalled in the now. It's like in the like a memory is in the now. Mm-hmm. So that flip book is like when you are right now thinking about the quote unquote past, you're thinking about it right now. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like I want to say almost like the argument, even though I'm in line with this, is like the argument for like there's just one now moment. So if it's more like a circular block universe, right, to put it in like the quantum physics way, is like, that flip book is showing you there's these like frames that are happening, and those are all the mini now moments that were quote unquote in the past, and then your storytelling collection of them is in this now moment, putting them all together and making a story out of it, which as you say that, I think that's can be a very beautiful, expansive way to relate to life. And that's the cool thing is like humans are like very much storytelling creatures. This is like one of the most like fundamental things that everybody can relate to on this planet, no matter who you are, is like stories. And it's in part, I guess, because of, it's not actually just because of the construct of time, because this existed before clocks. It was like people would sit around a fire and they would recall the cycles and patterns of their lives. But stories actually can be more closely aligned with the bigger picture of what time is trying to categorize, which is patterns and cycles and events that affect us. And we're cataloging them now in like calendars and days and minutes and that like sections it off. And it's like when you go too far into that, that's when you're feeling separation and you're feeling this like 3D construct almost out of proportion. And that is what would cause suffering. But sort of in the middle there is what you're saying is like this story where we quote unquote look back and we piece together all of our experiences to make sense of ourselves or whatever it is. And that though does have a limit, right? That's what we're kind of going to get to in this.
Something that's coming through is when you were mentioning, like in the past, we would sit around and share stories, right? Like think about like a tribe of like Native Americans circled around a fire and they're telling stories and like the ancestors are speaking and the elders are speaking and they're like sharing their wisdom. Stories were used as a catalyst of like deeper remembering, because stories of like relating to the past can be beneficial or they can actually cause you disconnect from your true nature. And I'm debating if I should save this for the part about can we change the past? Because I feel like this is where the deep lessons on like healing are going to come through. But just one quick note here that like the stories you tell yourself about your past are what create the experience of your now moment. So this conversation is so powerful because you're going to have a completely different perspective on what the past actually is that will lead you to freedom in the now moment. But I just wanted to add that in here.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think maybe just the only piece that I wanted to sort of interestingly touch on and also kind of just, what's the word? Just like give credit to, if you will. That's not the word, but just I want to acknowledge, sorry. I want to acknowledge this thing, which is like in a conversation of time, I feel like there's these things that it's like, okay, there's the modern physics approach, right? And this is where I think talking about the difference between space-time and time-space then can actually segue us into these further topics, which are where I think the portal towards like these more expanded views and relationship to time are going to come from this like expanded view of what time-space is. So space-time is essentially kind of like is the foundation of Einstein's theory of relativity. Space-time is essentially that space and time are interwoven and inseparable, and events are described by their position in this 4-dimensional continuum, right? So it's like we all essentially, for the most part, are assuming and are living in space-time, right? It's like you have to, from A to B, you have to walk through space, and that takes time. That's like the whole gist of it. And you can see how a lot of our beliefs and conditioning and stories result around, this concept that like, okay, you want to be successful, you have to start here, and then you'll walk here, and then you'll go here and end up over here. And there's truth to that. And there's also parts of it that we can kind of transcend, which is I think where the things will get interesting today. But that's what space-time is. And that's kind of like Einstein is very famous for that. He has this theory of relativity. And also because of that, it's actually cluing you into the idea that time is relative. So I'll just read some of these key insights just to cover off on here because I think it is interesting and we'll sort of create this framework in our mind of what we're oscillating between. So, like I said, in space-time, it's space and time are interwoven and inseparable. Events are described by their position in 4-dimensional continuum. Time is treated as a measurable dimension that progresses forward, linked to motion, gravity, and mass, right? So time is just always this linear thing, always passing, moving forward. Gravity bends space-time, which explains phenomena like time dilation, which is where time passes more slowly near massive objects. This is a big part of what the movie Interstellar showed us, was like, depending on where they're traveling and black holes and all this crazy stuff, the dad like ages a lot slower. And so when he comes home, his daughter is old and is dying. Like, it's crazy, right? Time relativity. And then the arrow of time in physics is giving time this linear quality. So it's just always moving forward. But what is interesting, and why I think a lot of spiritual teachers today will reference Einstein, is because he did acknowledge this weird thing about how it's relative, which is something that is both quantifiable. Like, there's formulas and stuff that actually help us with, like GPSs today are based off of these equations that in real time are able to adjust and show you like how long it's going to take to get to where you're going, etc. But it also, to me, is starting to clue us into the wonky nature of consciousness and time, and how things feel different depending on the circumstance. And so there's like observer effect, and there's like frequency and all this stuff where, yeah, if you're having fun, time quote unquote flies. And if you're bored, it moves at a snail's pace. Or you do a meditation and you just have no concept of time because you're in this no body, like whatever state of being. And that's more what people would say is time space. And this is the consciousness focused lens. This is what Joe Dispenza talks a lot about. So time space flips the emphasis, placing time as the primary dimension, with space taking a secondary role. So this concept is used in metaphysics, some interpretations of quantum mechanics, and consciousness studies. So basically it suggests that there's a world where time is fluid and malleable, accessible in non-linear ways, and space becomes more relational or abstract. And this is why people start to open themselves up to the idea that like you can actually create matter and shift reality from this heightened state of consciousness, because you're not just playing in like this linear thing where to get a table in front of me, I have to spend 3 hours building it. Like, yes, that's true, but we also play with reality in a very different way. And that's like a big part of neuroscience and Joe Dispenza and that sort of spiritual science world. And the last things I'll say here is basically that time space is associated with higher states of awareness, imagination, spiritual explanation. I think this is where, as you go down your spiritual path, you're accessing higher states of consciousness that I feel like, I mean, we know this, we've talked about this, where then people would say those are like lined up with different dimensions. And so time and space is operating differently there. And then in some spiritual teachings or quantum paradigms, they say that it reflects how consciousness navigates potential realities outside the constraints of physical space. So it's all just cluing us into like, okay, we flip it and we say time, space. How do we access that? And there's a science to this if you want to go into it with like Joe Dispenza. He's got this great series on Gaia called Rewired. And he explains like how these different, essentially doing heart-brain coherence starts to get us into time, space, where we have more of an effect on our reality than we've been previously taught. All of this to me is basically leading us to what we wanted to talk about today, which is like rethinking time, like rethinking the whole entire approach and what it means to us. So first of all, I just want to know what's coming through there, if anything, after my little scientific explanations.
Yeah, I feel like what is important to understand is that, like how you said, when you are on this awakening path, you're awakening to your true nature. So imagine that you came down into this earth realm and decided, I want to have this really immersive experience. And in order to do that, I'm going to forget my true nature. I want to make this as real as possible. So let me forget that I am limitless and time doesn't exist. Like, I want to experience stories. I want to experience time. I want to experience what it feels like to think about the past and to dream about the future. Like, I want to experience that. That feels so exciting. Or maybe it just is exciting. There's no feeling up there in the higher realms. But when you think about that, you came down here and you decided to play this game. And a part of the game is time existing. As you're on this awakening path and you're going through your spiritual awakening because you're turning inwards and you're remembering these deeper truths about your boundless nature, you start to interact with the game in a different way. No longer are you playing by the rules of 3D time and your experience of time changes as you remember your boundless nature and like who you actually are. So obviously we're having this conversation about time because we're on this journey of awakening to our actual true essence. And with that, we get to experience this thing called time in a different way, where we're now connecting into these like more 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional ways of living. And it's so cool to think about because now we get to bring these heightened states of awareness in terms of time and our limitless nature and all realities existing at once into the 3D game. So it's not like, oh, we just want to exit the 3D world and not play the game. It's like, wow, okay, now that we're understanding everything that we have spoken about and that you just shared about like the science and stuff and everything we're going to talk about, it's so cool to then like apply that logic into your current reality. And now your little avatar 3D self gets to play the game in a new way. So as you awaken and as you evolve, you are connecting in with a higher frequency and a higher state of awareness that then lets you relate to time from the higher states of awareness, from those higher dimensions. Am I saying this in a way that lands?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm like loving it because also I just feel like saying that I love that on this podcast is what we jam on, because we're like we're never gonna be the types that are just like, just time isn't real and just don't worry about it and everything is gonna be fine, and then we end up just fucking floating off into space and never, I don't even know, whatever, maybe that's someone's path, but like
we came here to
we're
play.
then gonna be like, yeah, we want to then be like, okay, let's be super like thoughtful about what we can do with this, because this is where it's like, then we're just highlighting what it really is to be a very powerful being, which is what we all are innately. And we're remembering so many new layers of that. And this is why we always make analogies of it being a game, because now we're like, okay, clock time, I see you. I know how I'm going to actually use this construct to my benefit. And now, because we even know we have this language of understanding, like the stories we tell about ourselves and the identities and the way that we relate to things, right? From like a subconscious lens, for example, then you get to say like, is this causing suffering or not? Maybe your relationship to clock time is on fucking point and doesn't cause suffering and it actually makes you feel even more limitless. Or maybe your relationship to clock time needs cleaning up and that is your story, because there's something between you and that construct of reality that is making you feel XYZ, making you feel like you don't have enough of it or you're in a rush or whatever that thing might be. And then you get to play with 3D space to move things around in your consciousness and in your actual reality to tap into the highest potential of that thing, which is what this whole 3D experience is supposed to be.
Oh, I'm having things click. Okay, so see how I'm wearing these like blue light blocker glasses, and the way that I'm perceiving reality is through this like tinted yellow lens. When we're talking about time, we then get to relate to time through a different colored lens that actually aligns with the higher perspectives and the higher truths. When you are suffering in relation to time and you're thinking, there's not enough time in the day, I'm always stressed, I can't get all this done, you will suffer. And every time you're suffering, it's because you're literally identifying with a false belief. There's like some sort of belief. This is like the basis of what Bashar channels too. Every emotion that like leads to suffering, that feels like you're suffering, is a result of a belief, some sort of perspective that you have. When you are suffering in terms of not having enough time or feeling stressed, like you can't get it all done in a day, that is because the lens that you're seeing and perceiving and thinking about time is not rooted in truth. It's not rooted in the higher perspectives of like what someone from the 4D and 5D would describe time as. You're seeing time through a limiting lens, aka there's not enough of it in a day. And that's just not true, because there's endless time. It literally doesn't stop. Maybe, I guess that can be debated, but
yeah, I know what you're saying though.
Like you right now, we're putting on a different colored lens so that you can perceive the clock in a way that's actually rooted in truth. Like you can look at the clock ticking and think in your head, there's endless amounts of time. I have all of the time in the day. And then you get to experience the lightness of who you actually are instead of like the suffering about identifying with the avatar.
Yes. What you are saying is what you're pointing to is that this idea of aligning yourself with the belief that there is enough time, it's actually, what it does is it acknowledges the clock and the quote unquote limited hours in a day, which is really just a cycle of daytime, nighttime. That's also where time comes from, is we noticed these cycles in the day and the planets, and we quantified them and we put them into a clock and a calendar. Great, very helpful. And then sometimes hurtful. Where it's hurtful is almost like the obsession with that, paired with the belief that it's running out or that you are not capable of essentially like figuring out what needs to quote unquote get done or become present enough to actually execute on what this present moment is asking you. So what I'm seeing now is this connection where productivity, I think, comes in where you use time management to say, okay, great, I have this tool of a clock and an hour that goes by, and I want to I have this concept of how long things take me. Cool. As soon as you put yourself in this new hour of this task, right? Like, okay, in the next hour, I need to write an email. I have an hour to do it. I have a meeting at 2, copy. Okay. Now that you're staring and you're looking at this project, it is no longer time to think about how much time you have left. The productivity comes from you being in the present moment and being in flow and dedicating your consciousness to this thing in front of you, which is both 3D and is a spiritual, experience, an energetic experience where you have both things going on. And the irony is that you unlock more levels of quote unquote productivity when you're in this present flow, because you can acknowledge and say, okay, I've set my timer for an hour. I know that that's going to run out at some point. It's going to notify me. Great. Now I don't care about that because I'm here doing this right now. And that's the constant practice of like, we know something so well because we're busy gals and we quote unquote have a lot going on, but we're always figuring out that balance of, okay, clock time, timelines, but also when we're dropping in to create a training or to do an episode, we're here. And sometimes that like time is like calling you and is distracting you. But the solution to that is essentially both based in like use 3D constructs to identify what will help you work better and like be more present, but also in those like frames of the now moments to drop into those very presently. Like rushing and feeling like there's not enough time, and I'm saying this also from my own experience of like experiencing this often, is when I'm adding in like a story that actually has nothing to do with this now moment.
Yes.
Because you could just forget about the existence of clocks and a deadline and calm the fuck down and be fine and get the thing done anyway. Or you could be doing what you're doing in this now moment, which is a very present task, and also be thinking, oh, fuck. And that's like a whole different experience. And
Right.
it sounds almost too simple, but I swear it's like the secret sauce between like productivity and time management, and then also understanding like joy and flow state and present moment and just like tuning in to what you got to do type of deal.
I feel like it's like every conversation we have is just bringing in a balance of the masculine and feminine. And this is in relation to time. It's almost like I'm imagining like with every process, you have the ego and you're like, okay, this is what's going to happen. You can now relax because this is like what we're going to focus on. And this is what's going to keep us like setting up the fence for us to kind of flow within. And then you have the feminine that's like, okay, now time doesn't actually exist. Go fucking flow. And this is like how kids kind of interact with time. And it's, as you were speaking, I was imagining how kids, of course, maybe there's moments where like they are being told that it's time to stop playing and they're like, oh, I don't want to. But think about when a kid, they're let out for recess. They're not sitting there being like, oh my God, recess is going to be done in 10 minutes. Now it's 9 minutes.
Right.
Now they're just like in flow, and they experience
present.
the reality in such a free flowing way. And I feel like because we have these missions that we came down here to complete, where our souls wanted to share and to tap into our gifts and to whatever way that looks for whoever, like the unique way that you feel good sharing your light, there has to be some sort of masculine structure that like keeps us in tune with life and the 3D realms. And I'm even having like a complete revelation now of just like time doesn't have to be this negative thing of like time is a construct and it's controlling you and it's like you're a victim to time. When what if now we shift our entire perspective on the 3D notion of time as being this like really beautiful thing that like keeps us in alignment and like
Yes.
keeps us in flow, and it is an invitation, almost like it's kind of like you live in a house where there's walls around you. Someone can look at that and be like, that's fucking terrible. You're confined. You're not living in nature. Like you're literally trapped inside these walls, when you're like, no, this is like cozy and it protects me and I can step
Yeah.
outside and tap into the limitless nature that exists literally right outside if I just walk through this doorway. And I feel like that's the invitation, that we're always just like bringing such a 3D earth perspective to
Yes.
these higher truths and like grounding them. And I feel like with time, it's so important, like how you're saying, to figure out how you can work with it. And like the same thing with the ego, get the ego on board, work with the ego. Like we're here for a reason. There's a divine path in front of us. Let's fucking make the most of it. And let's work with this construct of time and be like, wow, this is actually here for me to serve me. And I'm going to make it serve me.
Yes. Yes. Wow. I love that. Okay. I think I'll share. I was going to share this later, but it's kind of all coming up now. It's kind of like what you said, but there's like another like analogy that I thought of that I feel like will resonate. And then after that, we can pivot into like the past and the healing stuff, because I feel like that's really cool. Okay. So I had essentially this like idea of exactly what you just said. It's like how to use clock time to your advantage, right? Meaning like the hours in the day, the months, whatever. So essentially what I thought of was that you have this concept of acting as if in manifestation and the law of attraction, which gets you to become the thing that you desire without waiting for it, right? So you say like, you know, what would it be like or feel like to own my own business, to have abundance? So you like embody that now and you act as if it's already here. And then clock time signifies things like deadlines or showing up on time to a thing, or you have like a call, so you have to be there, right? So when we feel calm and regulated, there's a good kind of pressure that gets things moving. And this is aligned with, in human design, the root center is a pressure center and has like a healthy and an unhealthy version of pressure, where there's the healthy version that gets you to be on time, that gets things moving. It literally like gets you going. Like it's kind of semi-related to motivation and momentum. So then if we only think about making progress in meeting deadlines and getting to finish, having to finish something, then we suffer. But the middle ground is what you're saying, which is if you have this baseline state of being calm, present, inspired, this is where all like the nervous system work and just like the health wellness work that we do, like this is why it all helps everything. If you have that in place, then clock time functions like the act as if energy, because it gets you to be ready. We both know that when we have a client call, no matter what's going on, except for like extenuating circumstances, we show up. You show up and you do the freaking thing. And this is what the 3D, point of organization is, and time management, because then it's like you're quote unquote productive, but it's not this concept of like, oh, because I have to prove it to someone. You're using constructed time to help you get the most out of your day and out of your 3D reality field that we're playing in. Mm-hmm. And that is often how I remember I had this click in me, because I used to, when I first quit my job and I was like, literally had quote unquote nothing going on, I had way too much flow in my life that I was actually more overwhelmed and was like so just all over the place, because I didn't schedule anything. I was just like waking up like hoping that I was going to fucking figure it out. And it was terrible. And then what I started to do was like schedule and put structure into my days, and just like basic organization shit of like planning out the week ahead and putting things on my calendar and being like, okay, I got this thing going on. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, now I can flow in between these. And then also there's the very good utility of, if I tell myself, if I make an event that's online and that I told people I was going to show up to, I have to match that energy. Like I got to be fucking ready to go. And that's the beauty of like, if you relate this to your like entrepreneurship or creation journey, is we do these stretchy things that are tied to like this place and time. Like you got to be here at this time because you have to go. I mean, you can not go, but ideally you go and you have to, like, I always use that term, like assume the position and be ready to go, because that is what helps you grow and expand. And it's, to me, it's like a very similar thing of this manifestation concept, but you're using 3D constructs to make yourself show up and expand into the level that you know you're meant to be at.
Okay. Did you see this video? It's reminding me, this girl made a video where she was talking about using doorways as portals. How every time you walk through the doorway of your office, you use it as a portal to like shift into a different state of being. What you're describing is reminding me of that. And essentially you're using like time and appointments and scheduled events as portals into a higher state of being, or the embodiment of a certain state of being. So it's interesting to think about how, let's go back to the concept that time doesn't actually exist, how we're all just experiencing time as we flip the book and shift into different frames. What you're suggesting is that if we have something on our calendar at 4:00, you are using that to say, at this time, I am going to shift into this frame. And this is the energy I'm going to bring. And this is what I'm going to manifest into my reality based off of the state of being, the emotions, the thoughts that I'm having, and my consciousness of what kind of 3D material world is going to form around me. And that is so powerful because it puts structure into this kind of like boundless state that we are, where it can feel super overwhelming. Even someone who is like on a manifestation journey, if you're like just always thinking about how time doesn't exist, you're going to literally feel like you're just like floating around. And now you can use time as like, I'm literally imagining like doorways, like portals, like imagine these like circular portals that you're walking through where you're coated with a certain energy as you step into that time frame. And then you're choosing to establish yourself in a certain frame, in a certain state of being, which is what I was doing before this call. I literally texted Bella and I'm like, I'm feeling so overwhelmed. It's so ironic that we're having this conversation. And in that moment, I was watching these really powerful videos with Bashar talking about time. And I just had this like awakening aha moment. I'm like, wait, literally time doesn't exist. I am shifting my state of being into a different frame at every second, millisecond, like upon millisecond, like literally the most you can zoom in. We are always shifting and changing. Like the quanta pockets of energy that are collapsing and forming into material and 3D are literally collapsing and forming like billions of times a second. And you are always changing who you are at every given second. So I was like, why am I choosing to take on this narrative that I like have so much to do and I'm so overwhelmed? Like, why don't I just change into someone that's very peaceful, literally right here, right now? Why don't I just shift into someone that is feeling so at ease and like so ready to like take the next step of whatever it is I had to do. And literally I just like changed my entire energetic state of being. And it's interesting if I think about it, like I was using the time frame that we had to go into this recording as like a portal into a different frame, into a different state of being. And I think where people get into like a pattern of suffering is when they don't remember how much they are shifting and changing. And I'm saying remembering because this is something you innately know within you. It's a wisdom that you hold. It's literally the true essence of who you are, is this boundless, eternal light being. And you are literally manifesting the 3D at every given millisecond. So when you feel like you're stuck, when you feel like you are in a place where you don't want to be, it's because you're not remembering that you are literally choosing that state of being at every given freaking collapsing and forming. And that's pretty liberating to understand.
Very liberating. And God, this is so cool. And I actually cannot get over the perfect timing of this, because also this episode will be coming out during Capricorn season. And something that's coming through for me is like exactly this idea of like of portals and understanding like the relationship you have to time, which we just uncovered and sort of shifted, of like, instead of being like a victim to time or a victim to your to-do list, right? And there's nuance, because there's times when it's like, okay, maybe you are actually just doing too much and you need to like take things off your plate. Fine, whatever, right? Sort of a different conversation.
And like question why you're doing too much, because then that will
right. Question why you're doing too much, right? Yes, exactly.
Where's
like,
it coming from?
I can have a tendency of like working when I just literally do not need to be. Like my tasks are done and I'm just like, let me do more. And it's like, I'm like, calm down. Like you did enough. You're not getting an award for doing more things. Shut the fuck up and watch TV. Like that's
You'll text me
on
like
the opposite.
literally 1 a.m. your time, a question about work. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm sleeping.
No, it's not okay. I'm working on it. But here is the good side of this, right? Is what was coming to mind as you said all that is actually a couple of months ago, you sent me this quote from the Atomic Habits book, which is like, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And I brought up the Capricorn thing because I think the magic of what we're talking about, which is like this masculine, feminine thing, like you pointed out, is understanding how certain Capricornian things, like at least this is just the Capricorn in me talking, of like using time to your advantage, using systems to your advantage, is when you have these things in place, they let your limitless nature shine through. But when you don't have them, your limitless nature, because you're a 3D being, is desperately looking for something to grasp onto, and it just doesn't have it. And that's why you feel like maybe overwhelmed or thrown about or whatever it is. And so I'm realizing, for me personally, where I have really good systems in place is where there is so little overwhelm, because I just have it like, it's almost robotic at this point, but it helps me because I don't have to think about it. So it's like in editing videos or on my computer, I have these meticulous systems of folders, and it sounds silly as I say it out loud, but I'm telling you, it's like these little things that then let me. It's like you're taking care of the stuff that you don't need to spend your precious energy on, so that then your precious energy is used in its genius. So it's like these systems that you could put in place, let's say whether you're listening to this in Capricorn season or not, but it's like, this is where your 3D world is here to help you tap into your boundless, limitless nature. So you put these systems, organizations, or time blocks or whatever it is into place that then take out this like mental part that you just don't need to spend time every time worrying about. And all of a sudden you free up all this energy to be in your genius or to be present or whatever it is. And that quote is just like hitting me so hard, of like, you can have all these like goals and aspirations for your life or the week, but if you don't have, and there's probably exceptions to this too, because everybody's different, but it does feel slightly universal, where it's like, if you don't have the masculine structure or the systems or whatever that means to you in place, it's just tough to get it. It's just tough to actually feel like good about all the things that are going on.
Yeah. It's really beautiful to see it that way too. But then it's like also finding, there's so many things that are like coming up in my mind. I'm like trying to choose which one to like with the systems. Think about even like you guys listening, you have a genius, you have a certain flow state that when you're in it, you channel light. This is literally what I was teaching in the training, and we have a mastermind and we release trainings every month. And the training that I just did was connected to us sharing our light, unleashing our gifts. And when we're in that flow state, that is when light can actually channel through us. And what you're describing with these masculine structures, it's like a lot of people spend all of their time and energy thinking about the structure, when if they just had a stabilized structure that was just set in stone, they wouldn't have to spend their energy thinking about the new structure every single day. And this is literally the balance of masculine and feminine. And
Right.
It's reminding me of like what we set up with our episodes of sending them to our editor. We have like this beautiful Notion doc with like all these different segments and where the files go. And now it's like, we don't even have to think about that. We just like da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And
Right.
I just want to send out an invitation for you guys. Where in your life are you exerting too much energy thinking about the structure, where when you're setting up structures, you have to think about time? And this is why time will feel so limited when you're always thinking about how things need to get done. It's because your logical mind needs to actually think about time in that moment. Like when we're setting
Right.
up the structures, we're thinking about on Monday we do this, on Tuesday we do this. Oh, on
Right.
Thursday I have all of this. So can you do this? Like we're needing to connect to the 3D notion of time.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
you are freeing up this mental capacity to just literally have a structure, you don't have to actually think about that. You just wake up, you do your thing, you're in flow, you choose whatever the hell you want to do and how you want to live life and how you want to express your light. and you just have that place to flow within where you're not actually needing to like connect in and think about the logic of time of when things need to get done. And you're able to disconnect from that and come into the higher realms of like, time is an illusion and all these things. And let me just get into flow state. So I really, really like that. That's like making things click for me in a big way.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. I want to now go more esoteric, if you will, because now I want to get into, I feel like this is beautiful. We like crush the like masculine aspect of how to actually make that useful. And it's actually aligned with the concept of time being a construct, but it's like use the construct to your benefit. And now I kind of want to segue into just this conversation more broadly about, I think it's more about the relation to it in a way of like the past, how we relate to the past, the sort of portal and conversation around healing and how we can transcend time with it, etc. I won't say too much yet, but I know you had a lot coming through for you around healing and it transcending time. And yeah, I'm excited to like see what kind of wisdom comes through there, because I also feel like this is where in a way we'll like end off and it will help people get the wisdom, the higher wisdom that's really here to like provide a lot of expansion.
Yeah. Okay. So let me like introduce this with just a remembrance of what the subconscious is and how this kind of creates our experience of reality, because this will make things make sense in a bigger way. But we, throughout our life, have had these experiences, and especially during like our formative years when our subconscious is being formed, that you can think of as like the part of the brain that acts as the program, so that when you're an adult, you don't have to think about how to tie your shoe. You don't have to think about how to walk. You just wake up and you walk. You wake up and you're able to drive your car. It's because we have this beautiful thing called the subconscious that houses programs on how reality works and how we can continuously perceive reality, so we don't have to think about that. And we can kind of work on autopilot in the 3D realms. When you are forming these programs, there are certain experiences that have happened in your childhood where it's not so much about the specific experience. It is the meaning that you assigned that experience and the perception that you held about yourself in that experience, where you start to develop an identity around who you are in this world. So let's say you had an experience of being treated not kindly by someone in 3rd grade. You will then perceive that experience through the lens that you're trying to make sense of it. Your little brain is like, okay, if 1 + 1 = 2, then this must be true. What you're doing in that experience is saying, if this happened, then I must not be enough. I must not be lovable. I must not be worthy to be chosen by this person. It must be a me thing. And we start to develop these belief systems and identities around who we are as beings. When we are healing in our present day, we will suffer when we are relating to the past through that specific lens that we decided about ourselves in the now moment. So we're recollecting the past and looking at it through the exact same lens that we held at that moment. So we will feel literally like we are still in that experience. And this is what like emotional suffering is. It's like those emotions are literally stored in the body until we reconcile them.
Right.
When you are doing subconscious healing, you're looking at a place in your life that you are suffering and experiencing pain because you are still holding on to a story that happened in the past, and you are collapsing time in a way where you will experience that same story in your now moment. So now let's like zoom out. I want to introduce these like higher perspectives of time. Time doesn't exist, right? We just talked about how it's a book. We're literally like flipping the pages of the book, and what we experience as time is just us shifting in frame to frame to frame. When you are healing, you are in your now moment looking at the way that you are perceiving yourself, and you are shifting that because you're choosing to see a frame from a different perspective. You're choosing to see a past event as something different than what you decided in that past moment. Now, people will say that, okay, because time doesn't exist, when we heal a perspective in the now moment, and you're in like a subconscious healing session, or you're just doing your own deep healing of looking at the way that you perceive yourself and you're like, is this actually true? Like, is this something I want to continue to believe about myself or the world? Is it causing me to feel suffering? The answer is yes. Let me just think about, like, is this actually true? What you are doing is you are healing yourself in the now moment, but you are not only healing the experience of your now moment, you are also shifting the past. Like, this is very real stuff. Healing is so powerful because you're literally changing the story, the timeline of events, the one that you're currently in, and that past event no longer exists in the same way that it did prior to you shifting your perspective. It can go both ways too. This is like the crazy shit about like manifestation and timeline shifting. Cool. Yeah, and this is why when you heal, it's also healing for other people. I'm getting this like huge download right now. It's like it has an impact on the way that other people experience reality because the quantum structure of time, that past version of yourself will then interact with other people in a different way that will cause healing for them. Like, this is why the work that we're doing of like waking up and healing and subconscious healing and all this work, it is literally having this web effect on other people as well. Because as you heal, you're healing past versions of yourself and you're also healing all of the people that you interacted with in that timeline. This is like, it kind of hurts your brain when you're hearing this, but there are some key points that you want your logical brain to just understand.
Yeah. No, but to me, I think for sure between the two of us, because I know a lot of people listening have, but whether you have or not, for sure when you've experienced a healing moment like this and you've also seen the like logic defying effect that it has on your reality, like when you suddenly like your partner is like a quote unquote different person the next day and you're like, holy fuck, like that's what this is.
You shifted reality.
You shifted reality. And what I'm realizing, I was writing this down as you were speaking, which is just that then this is why it affects time in all quote unquote directions. Because first of all, the foundational new piece of understanding, that is how we make meaning out of things. So like in the past, we would do this unconsciously, subconsciously. It was a program that also just like our society reinforces all the time of like, make a meaning out of this thing about you. And that inherently is neutral until it tends to be like in the negative, right? And when we start making positive or just even keeping things neutral, meaning out of things, that's like life 2.0. So what I'm getting at is it's like now we are interacting with ourselves and we're experiencing reality much closer to its true nature. And as we experience things in the now, right? So quote unquote, something that happens today, because I now am embodying this wisdom of being aware of the meaning that I make out of it. And sometimes we forget and we go ahead and make meaning and then we, look back at it later or whatever. But this is why it's like this spiral thing, analogy that I've heard you talk about. And Joni, shout out to Joni in our community, once commented this somewhere about a spiral analogy. I thought it was so cool. Where like with every step that you go, you're bringing with you these new levels of consciousness and it's changing the game. Like it changes how you interact with things. So I'm just thinking, and I don't really know what this question means, but I'm just thinking about like, my brain is raking, but it's basically like,
it's a lot.
It's like, I'm just having these things click around almost in my mind. I'm watching the construction of my life be different, where there's a clear break in the road, a timeline shift. That's what it is. It's a timeline shift of where one lifetime I was making meaning that caused suffering and I was doing it unknowingly. I just didn't even know. That's the point of it being subconscious. You don't realize it until you know better. And then you become a super conscious being. And then you start to be able to like be aware of the things as they happen / change the course of it in that now moment.
Right.
Also, because this is all in the framework of seeing that time is not linear or as limited as we've been taught. And so in this arena, you can play with past, quote unquote, past, present, future in a different way because your consciousness is the consistent thing throughout them. And then you're realizing any suffering that you're feeling is in the now moment.
Yeah.
And this is something that I love. I remember witnessing Sarah Zula talk about this in a call or something, or a podcast. I can't remember. I think it was a call because it was with someone. She was asking them, like, is that thing that you're referencing happening right now?
Yes.
And the answer was no. And so that very quickly was showing you, like, to use the construct of time to quote unquote leave it in the past, but then also realize that the suffering and the stories that we make out of it are happening in the now moment. And that's why healing is all in the now moment. And it's also through the freaking heart, because the heart is beyond space and time, and it also marries the two. And then you're changing, I don't even know what to call it, just like timelines and reality from this present moment that could affect both past and future. And I truly feel like, to answer this question, can you change the past? I feel like then you literally do change the past, because if the past, first of all, is something that is only recalled in this now moment, then all that the past is your recollection of memories and a quote unquote past event. And if you change how you perceive it, you've changed the past. And then you've freed yourself in this now moment to be whatever the fuck you really want to be.
Yes. So much of suffering that people experience is them chaining themselves to a past experience and subconsciously believing and feeling into a reality where it's still happening in the now. Like, this is where I'm like sitting in a coaching session with someone and I just am taking note of the way they're talking about their suffering. And so much of the suffering is stemmed from them thinking they are still in that reality. And this is where the collapsing of time is playing out not in your favor, because if you are hanging on to that past experience, you will collapse time into the now moment as if that is still happening for you. And you will experience things in your reality that literally reflect that belief and that state of being, where you will just be like, no, this is still very much happening to me. The world is against me. Things are always happening to me. But if you were to connect back into that experience, the healing comes through when you widen the perspective and you start to see, whoa, okay, there are so many different ways that I can see this experience. And on top of that, there's so many different ways I can define myself through the lens of this experience. When we remove the limiting definition of who we are because of that experience, that's when we access our limitless nature. And that self that was experiencing that thing in that moment receives the healing. They've received the higher perspective and they're freed. And we will suffer when we're connecting with the past and thinking that it's still happening in our now, instead of seeing it as a really beautiful divine experience that led to our awakening, that led to our remembrance, that led to our strength, that led to our power. And to see the experiences of the past as, maybe this is like really important to note too, that like, this is not saying that it was like right the way someone treated you or the way things went down. That's not what I'm saying, but it's just acknowledging that what has happened in the past is happening for you. And it's like a portal to step into a deeper level of remembering who you are. So for anyone that's listening right now, if there is an experience that has happened to you in the so-called past, understand that that experience is very much happening right now in this now moment. It's just one of those frames in the book. You can free that version of yourself by choosing to see the experience from a different lens. And that's like it in its simplest form.
Yeah.
Because our suffering of, let's say, I don't feel like I'm enough right now in this now moment. Okay, where in that frame, in that book of frames, was the experience where you decided that was just the way you are in this reality and the way things are? Because from that lens, you'll be able to see, oh, this is like someone was going through something. Maybe they broke up with me because they were freaking going through their own shit at home and it had nothing to do with who I am as a being. And all of these beautiful divine truths come in where then you're freeing that version of yourself.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. This is literally what quantum timeline healing is. You're like connecting in with younger versions of yourself and teaching them the higher perspective and allowing them to free themselves from a limiting view that's causing them to suffer and to dull their light. That's what quantum timeline healing is. And that's why it's so powerful to do that kind of healing.
Yeah. And with this, you're able to hold multiple perspectives, which is to see that, you know, there's like a thing that happened, right? And we're just addressing it, and it's not, basically you're not like making a definitive comment on the good or bad nature of that thing that happened, right? There's things that happen that are not graded, maybe like whatever, you would just paint a certain picture. But the point here is we're catching ourselves in the meaning that we make, and any meaning that starts to reflect our core being. You can say like that person was going through stuff, they were whatever, like, you know, quote unquote, I'll just use the term because it just helps to explain it, like bad things happen, right? But the point is, what is the thing that you are carrying with you from it in this now moment? That's the difference, is it doesn't make it quote unquote okay or acceptable or whatever. It's like, this is about how you as a being carry forward in a way that will not cause suffering and will allow you to heal and change the perception and meaning that you drew from it.
It's really beautiful. And that's exactly it. I love that you described it in that way, because it is all about the meaning. Like, our minds are meaning making machines, and we will create identities and belief systems around the meaning that we assign to certain experiences. I want to now connect this to kind of like the future, because this is where we understand the quantum reality of things and how powerful we are with timeline shifting and manifestation. It's so important that you guys are listening to this, because you're understanding the logic behind how powerful healing is, so that when you're in a healing session, you're really surrendering into the modalities and understanding the power that's happening. Or you're journaling and you're connecting in with a younger version of yourself. You're understanding how this stuff actually works and how powerful it is. The same goes for shifting into higher realities and manifestation and creating your own heaven on earth. And what we now get to pull in with these understandings of time not existing is that when you desire something, you can only make that thing happen in the present moment. And I want to bring up this concept of like putting ourselves in this imaginary waiting room, which is such a powerful teaching that I was really leaning on, I guess like 2 years ago, I think it was. I was noticing how I was putting myself in this imaginary waiting room of like, okay, when this happens, I will feel this way. When I achieve this, then I'll be able to like call myself this title or whatever it is. Like, putting a desire out in the future, putting a little like roadmap in front of me and saying that once I reach that finish line, I will feel a certain way. But think about the fact that time literally doesn't exist. So what you are claiming in your now moment is what you're claiming in your reality. You're saying, this is the kind of reality I want to live in. So when you're claiming that the future holds something more significant than the now, you're saying that I want to live in a reality where I'm always waiting. And the universe is like, okay, we can do that for you. Like, order up. I just love to be in a reality where I'm just waiting and feeling so incomplete, and like there's something out in the future, and this is just how I want to experience my world. That's what the universe hears when you're saying that I'll be happy when. Because the now is the only moment that ever exists. So what you're essentially claiming is that type of now moment, which is what you're claiming for your reality. So understanding the mechanisms of like manifestation is understanding that you're choosing who you show up to be in every single second. And that is causing reality to collapse in a specific way. And I think these teachings really give you more of the logic behind the manifestation practices that allow the mind to kind of surrender into the processes. So yeah, I wanted to add that in as well, that when you can think of it as like, there are multiple different versions of you, all in different realities that are existing right here in this very moment. There's a version of you that's literally sitting at a desk right now, working a 9-to-5 job. But we experience the now moment that we're in based off of our state of being and like what we are funneling our consciousness into.
Yeah.
So if you want to experience a higher reality, funnel your consciousness and state of being into that, and you will land in that timeline. Like, think about the way that we have shifted our reality over the past 2 years, year and a half, before we even started this podcast. We like came together. We're like, okay, We want to do this, have a podcast. We want to live a life of freedom. We want to serve. We want to tap into our gifts, do all this stuff. Like, it didn't even start there. We were just following the intuitive hit, but then it slowly unraveled in that way. And like with the power of our minds and focusing on that one outcome, we have literally just landed in that frame of time.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I freaking love that you're bringing this up too, because it's making me reflect on, I actually really think this is something I began to master just earlier this year. And I know you helped me in a lot of these moments where I was very much in that state of like waiting. It wasn't really waiting. It was like just frustration with something that was quote unquote out there, because I was believing that it was out there. And in that moment, it's like, you're really convinced that it's out there. Like for me, it was really about money. And I was like, just in this frustrated, like past experience of being broke essentially, and was so over identifying with that current reality and that perception that it was creating more of it. And it was the craziest shift ever, which we talk about in the wealth consciousness episode, where I started to tune myself to an abundant reality. And then it was literally like,
that was wild.
It was wild. And I don't know I think I told you this, but it's just kind of fun to say on the podcast. I had a date on my calendar that I was going to get a part-time job if I couldn't get like an income going yet.
Yeah.
And I think we had like signed a client, or like something shifted literally like that day. And it was fucking insane, because I like set this calendar date, and it was partially out of like stress, partially out of like, okay, exciting, a deadline to work toward, whatever. But it was crazy because building up to that moment, I did all this work on my wealth consciousness, and then it literally shifted right in time, which was nuts. But the bigger picture that you're sharing here is really inspiring, because it just shows you that you will hear these teachings and you will roll your eyes at them until you open your heart and give them a chance and understand and experiment with what happens when you stop waiting. And anybody that has gone from an artificial waiting room to claiming a reality will tell you how fucking crazy it is of what happens. I know we both can recall very specific moments that were like big, like getting out of the waiting room, like what you just explained for you. I had one like 2 years ago when I just decided that I was going to be a content creator, and it was like literally 2 months later, I like had my first time going viral. Like it was insane. It was just because I chose to embody and claim that identity and that reality. And it's all to say, you know, that quote unquote future that you're waiting for is just a now moment. So you might as well figure out right now how to be satisfied and fulfilled and grateful and in abundance and whatever it is that you desire. Because if you can't feel it in this now moment, you know, yes, there's times when it's like we go through ebbs and flows. I'm not saying it will be impossible for you to feel it if you can't literally in this split second, but the present moment work that you do on your consciousness is ultimately what would build a future, if any, where you actually get to enjoy, right? If there is a construct of this future where you would actually access this reality that you are desiring. And I feel this personally really deeply because of how I've gone on this journey of being so almost like too, I guess the word is like obsessed in a way with the vision that it takes me out of the present moment. But now knowing that I have clarity of vision, and I ironically am more sure that I will have all the time that I need to accomplish all the things and all my ambitions of all the million things that if I just right now was plotting out my time in the day and the year, I would give up, right? Like I want to DJ, I want to direct and produce a movie with my brother, I want to do this, I want to travel, like a lot of fucking goals. But what I'm working on right now is the present moment, because it's literally all that I have. And the times that I was obsessed with just thinking about that and trying to plot out how I would get there did not bring those things to me any faster, and they just caused suffering. And now it's like, okay, I know how to do the present moment. I know how to show up to today. Now I can use constructed time and dates and goals in a way that actually supports me and gets me to show up rather than make me think, oh fuck, I'm running out and I'm not going to get to accomplish this.
Yeah. A powerful question that I would throw back to any listener out there that's feeling like they're experiencing what you were describing of being in that waiting room is identify the feeling that you think is at the finish line and then ask yourself, what is stopping me from feeling this right now? And just start to notice any stories that are coming up around, oh, I can't feel this way because, or I actually feel this way instead, because that right there is the invitation that your soul is guiding you into. And I always say your desires are like the goalposts that show you what kind of energetic state of being your soul is craving to like unlock and access. So someone that's craving more money, it's like your soul's knocking on your door being like, hey, we're so abundant. We're just ready for you to feel this. And it's coming to the surface through the mind as like, I need more money, when it's really the soul being like, hey, let's feel our inner abundance. Let's tap into this. And then I promise the 3D will reflect that outward. So never shame yourself for feeling like there's some sort of finish line, because we're 3D beings. We're eternal light beings that are experiencing this 3D realm. And we're here to create and enjoy and to play the game. And we are meant to have desires. I think they're very important directionals on our path. And it's just using them in the right way. Like we always say, things find their proper place when there's like the correct consciousness behind it.
Yes.
And with desires, there's no difference. Use your desires as like a directional. They're the goalpost. They're the thing that is pointing you in towards a certain energetic state of being that your soul is ready to unlock. And it's really beautiful to see it that way. So think about the pages in the book and think about the page that your soul is literally ready to tap into. And I always say this too, that when you're getting like intuitive hits on a type of reality that you're like, ooh, I think I want to move to this location, or I want to lean into this action or do this with some sort of business idea. That is because there is a you on one of those pages of the book that you are starting to become connected to. There's like a frequency that's being sent, and you're starting to communicate with that version of self, until one day you literally are so connected to it that it just becomes you. Like what we tapped into as like a manifestation practice is now just the reality that we're in. And now we're tuning into another type of reality. And it's this constant fun journey of like evolving and shifting and remembering our light so that we can be boundless and timeline hop and enjoy the game in this way.
Dude, wow. So freaking powerful. I'm just feeling how many people are going to be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, this just lets you properly play the game, because then you're like, okay, I do see a future, but now I just believe that that's real because I know that it's all existing at once in this, if you use like the block universe construct, that it's like all happening right now, then that means you can just opt into that frequency and just jump into that. And then your 3D world will arrange itself accordingly. Like, frequency preceding form, like Peter Crone says. It's like, that's literally what it's all about. And now we just addressed the time part of it, so you can recognize where you're creating unnecessary suffering with time and where you can actually use it as a very powerful tool to be a master of this reality.
Boom. This was an epic episode. I feel like we went on a journey.
It was so
Y'all been
good.
taken
Oh
on
my
a
God.
journey.
I feel like, yeah, legit. I also was thinking, I was like, this is totally the type of conversation that could take, like, we could keep going for like another 2 hours and just like open up all these other rabbit holes.
Literally. Yeah, I'm excited that we
Wormholes.
dove into this. I'm really curious what came through for you guys, because you guys are such powerful beings that I know you're having your own revelations that maybe we didn't even touch on. Share them with us. Like, comment if you're watching on YouTube, comment if you're watching on Spotify. I also want to take a moment right here to plug the mastermind. We have this insane mastermind community that is just so freaking epic. We have 2 different options of how you can come into our world. Well, actually 3. We have the regular Oasis membership that is $14.99, and you gain instant access to all of our workshops, our live workshops, our meditation vaults. We do monthly energy readings with integration and journal prompts. We have experts come on. We have these really beautiful workshops. Today, literally in 2 hours, we have a guest coming on to teach us about astrology and how you can advance in your career using your astrological placements and understanding your astrological placements, which is so epic. So then we have that, but then we also have the Quantum Creator Mastermind, which is specifically built for people who are really ready to shift into the fragment of time, the page on the book where they are embodying their mission and their purpose and they're sharing their light. So at first we were saying it's for spiritual entrepreneurs, but I feel like I want to widen that and really invite anyone who is on a path of exploring why the fuck they came to this earth realm and really tapping into their mission and their purpose, because we have people in this mastermind that are just starting their journey. They haven't even started the business yet. They're just exploring why they came down to earth and what their mission is and how they're meant to share their light and their gifts. And this month's theme is all about unleashing your gifts. We're doing some human design work. We are exploring the unique ways that our light wants to be expressed outward. And we are diving into this theme of gifts. We thought it was timely with Christmas and the holidays.
We were like, what aligned with Christmas? Oh yeah, gifts.
But it's also like always so divine, the topics that we dive into in the mastermind, because it's like perfectly aligned with what we're going through, what information and data is being channeled through us for us to share with the collective. So if you want a very supportive community that is here to really be there for you and hold you accountable and support you and love you as you are on this journey of exploring your mission and purpose and really taking big, bold, leapy action, scary leaps, I mean, stretchy leaps.
I like leapy action. That's fun.
I said, like, had it in my head. I'm like, that's a word. And then I said it. I'm like, that's not a word.
Leapy action is like if a leprechaun was taking action. It would
You
be
got to
leapy.
take your leapy action. Stretchy leaps is what I was trying to say. But I do like leapy action. We can coin that term. Definitely check that out. We'll leave the links below. And just know that we always have live workshops that you guys can hop in on. They're freaking epic. And yeah, I want to hear from you guys about this episode. Definitely drop your comments below and reach out to us.
Yeah, for real. Amazing. Beautiful. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you're listening to this right before the end of the year, happy freaking 2025. If you're listening to this in 2027, hello from the past. Hope that your future is doing great.
Oh, and do our free meditation because it's fucking epic.
Yes. Guys, every single episode, just please always check the show notes because we have so much good stuff going on at every level, like free meditations. We have the workshop, we have our mastermind, we do one-on-one coaching, like we do it all. Okay. So check it out and follow your intuition on what's aligned for you. And yeah, this meditation is freaking epic. It's to remember your mission. And if you know anything about the meditation journeys that Nikki and I put together, they are literally out of this world. Literally. So yeah,
literally.
That's it. Thank you guys so much for listening. We love you so much. We're so grateful to this community. So grateful to all the Omis all over the world. Thank you for hanging out with us for this entire freaking year. There is so much more to come. We are just getting started and we're just so grateful. So that's it. I love you. I love you guys. That's it.
I got to go buy my bread from the farmer's market before our workshop.
Clock time is back.
Sourdough time.
All right. Bye guys. We'll talk to you soon and we'll see you in 2025.
Bye.